to March 15th, 1921. Thomas A. Edison. Above is the official one, which is typewritten. This other one was just on a piece of inter-office paper, and it's addressed to Mr. John P. Constable, 2124 Cleveland Street, Orange, New Jersey. Dear sir, replying to your letter of January 15th, 1921, you are not employed by the year, but on a weekly basis, the same as all other employees. I had the right to terminate your services and salary at the time of any week. And sending you a check for salary up to March 10th, 1921, I merely considered that I was making you a present of several weeks' salary for a reason that your engagement and any obligations on my part thereunder ended on January 15th, 1921, in accordance with my note to you of December 30th. Yours truly, Thomas A. Edison. That's actually the official notice. The other one was just written on inter-office paper. This one is rather interesting in the fact that it shows how Mr. Edison conferred back and forth with his people. This is dated September 2nd. It has no date. It says, Mr. Edison, please suggest how you want Constable's model Ambrola X tested. Its initial CE, which means Charles Edison, and then Charles is written in bold letters across the top of that. Underneath it, it says, let me hear it today, with the big E. Now, the big E was the way Edison signed everything that we have on record. So it's to indicate the type of correspondence and how little time he spent really putting his name down. Holding is from the office of the Rowan Iron Company of Chattanooga, Tennessee, dated January 21st, 1879. It's a citation to Casimir Constable for his record production on the cost of pig iron per ton. And it goes on with the board of directors and so forth. And then it says on here, who has sole charge of the company, mines and furnaces, for the past 4 years, and whose management of the same has been highly creditable to him and satisfactory to the company. As an expression of his appreciation of his service, it is hereby resolved that the secretary of the company may direct to place the foregoing upon the minutes of this meeting of the board of directors and make the same a part of the records of the company. I might mention in here that he was producing pig iron for less than $10 a ton, which was unheard of in those days. And when he started with the company, the beginning of the 4 years, they were in the $19 a ton class, and in 4 years he reduced it to $10 a ton. He increased their production from 400 to 500 tons a month to over 700 in the last 2 years that he was in charge of the firm as far as their iron was concerned. It's just another one of those documents that goes along with history, I think.
Now you have something here that the company gave him?
Yes, we have a lantern here which is inscribed to William, and this was given to him as superintendent, and it's been at the hall for years, and it will be. Mm-hmm. But it shows the history of a good engineer and what he had accomplished. Mm-hmm. Catches that one pretty good.
Memories you'd like to share with us.
I'm going to skip around because it's hard to concentrate them all in sequence as they come along. I can remember Christmases in Constableville. It was quite a gay time, and of course we had quite a different population than we have now, and it was practically all rural, but it was one of the main places that people came to, because Boonville was 7 miles, and with a horse that was a long ride. And cars weren't too prevalent. So they always had quite a activity around Christmas time. They used to have the band out, and they'd go down the bandstand, and they'd give out little boxes of candy to all the kids, and everything was decorated. And then it more or less took the whole town in, and that Christmas week was really quite a time for everybody to get together. They went from house to house. We used to have people used to come over to the hall. We decorated the hall. I've got some old pictures of it with the decorations on the front and some pictures with the inside. They're just normal Christmas pictures of the tree and everything. But of course the great thing then was everybody made Christmas cookies. All the kids made them, and they took them to school always came home with a couple extra boxes. But it was quite a time. It's much different than it is today, I will say that. And of course, nobody else could go anywhere farther than Constable, so they had to make their own entertainment, and they did a very good job at it. Being a boy at that age that I was, and with the farm and everything, and the animals and so on, it really was quite an education by itself. And there's so many memories of the different things that we used to do. I know one Thanksgiving, one Halloween, I wasn't in on this because I was too young. But I remember they put a buggy on top of St. Mary's steeple in the Catholic Church, and everybody in the town tried to figure out how they ever got it up there. But it was right over the steeple. And then right next to that, this brings a memory of the old Star Theater, of which I have 4 chairs that I bought for 50 cents. They were just old, hard, handmade Tug-Hill chairs, no paint or anything, and they were just hard boards. And we used to go to the movies for 5 cents, and then later it went to 10. And of course they were silent movies, and had a lady there that played the piano, and as the villain got really rough, the music got better, and as the coaches started running faster over the screen, why, of course, the music increased in speed. And then as things slowed down, why, then we went back into low gear and everything went along fine. That used to be quite a thing on Saturday afternoon to go to the Star Theater. It had a little stage, but the actual floor was flat so that you were looking up at the screen all the time. And if somebody in front of you was a little bit taller than you were, you had a little difficulty seeing, but we managed, and it was an enjoyable type thing. Of course, the Sugar River goes through Constableville, and there weren't any trout in it in the area where it went through our farm, but there were some great suckers in there, and we used to try to catch them. You know, you could even drop hook on top of them, and they wouldn't catch them. And they didn't bite very well because the water was so clear. I think they could see us fooling around up there, but it used to be a group of us would go down, go all through there looking for the way to catch suckers and so forth. But that, of course, one story is going to lead to another, and I've got to tell one story on Pat O'Brien, who was quite a character in Constableville. Still is. Pat and I have always been good friends. We were pretty good chums back in those days. We could get in a lot of trouble, too. And we were together one day, and we weren't supposed to go in the hall. Everybody was away, and we were told we could play outdoors, and they'd be back in a little while. Well, somebody had started the furnace fire. Now, in order to heat that place, we had a great big pipeless furnace in the basement, and it came up into the center of the middle hall. Had a great big grill on it that was quite a sizable one. And usually when they started the furnace, there was a rug across it in the summertime. Somebody left a rug over it. Luckily, it was a woolen rug. And Pat and I decided that there was a cookie jar in the hall that had cookies in it, and we thought we might entertain ourselves with a few cookies, so we went in. As we went upstairs to go into the pantry, we walked through the hall, and here was this wool rug just glowing. It hadn't burst into flame, but it was glowing. We said to Pat, you know, we ought to do something about this. So we opened the front door and threw it out, and watched pretty closely to make sure that there wasn't anything that dropped down through the grill work into the furnace that could cause any more fires. And we were the heroes, although we were actually probably due for punishment for going into the house and knocking off the cookie jar when we weren't supposed to be in there.
How old were you then?
Pat and I were probably, he must have been 8 years old, 7, 8 years old, right along in there. And Pat always reminds me of about every time we go see him. He'll say, well, how's the cookie jar? I said, well, I haven't gotten it any of them recently, Pat. I had a friend of mine that used to always say, he'd say, Johnny, well, I've got to do this. And he'd always say, well, I got to get my cookie jar. Finally, I realized what the cookie jar was. That was his bank. But I told Pat that our cookie jar was real cookies. It didn't have any money in it. It was real cookies. I can remember Constableville when we first went up there with my dad in 21. The main street was dirt. The sidewalks were wood. The Hotel Parquet was the Schwank Hotel. And the big Doyle block was still standing with Doyle's Hardware. And Mr. Doyle was quite a character. He was there for years. And you always saw him dressed in an old green army shirt and pants and a pair of those felt boot leggings with a pair of rubber boots on the bottom, and he lived in the back of the store, and that's where he was. And when you wanted anything, he'd come out and wait on you. It was a store, as time went on, became more and more historical as far as I was concerned, because there were things in there that were antiques then, and I don't know what you would call them today. He even had old button high-top ladies' shoes for sale, and they went out back in the early Victorian days. Here we were talking 1921, 22. The hotel parquet has not changed too much. The main so-called lobby has not changed. The actual structure of it, the color is a little better. It used to be two tones of green, a dark green bottom and a lighter green top. The bar has been extended out into that room. Before that, the bar was just up in the one corner. They didn't come all the way out. There was just a little place where they could sign up if they came in to spend the night, but they didn't serve out there. The dining room had been added. Johnny Parquet, who bought it from the Davises later on, added on the dining room. He enlarged it. The original dining room was about half the size of the one that's there today. But basically, the hotel is pretty much the same, except for what we call some modern conveniences have been added. I know the summer that I spent there, my dad was getting the hall ready for us to move into for the following year, because we spent that summer up there getting it ready to bring the family in. It needed a few things in the line of conveniences, such as a bathroom and so forth. It had more thunder mugs than any place I've ever been in my life, and wash basins with pitchers and soap dishes and complete sets of them. They were all over the place, and all the little hot water canisters that they used to carry up and downstairs. If you wanted a bath, the old tin bath is still there at the hall, and that was kept upstairs and moved from room to room. And if you wanted a bath, they brought you up a few buckets of hot water. And some of them were painted red and had hot on the side, and the others were generally the color of the room or the color of something else, so you knew which was hot and which was cold. And then, of course, was a problem after you took the bath. Here you had this great big tin tub full of water, but they come up and dispose of that at the same time. So we decided that wasn't the way to take a bath, so my father did put a bathroom in upstairs, which was taken out when the house was restored. I think it should have been left in to show the fact that Constable Hall represented 6 generations that lived there, and it would have showed the improvements as time went on. Another good thing that I think a lot of people, at one time the bishop came from Syracuse, and I think he was having confirmation, and he stayed at the hall. And it was in the wintertime, and it was beastly cold, and I recall it. And he got up in the morning, and he was sleeping in the room across the hall from where the bathroom was. And as he walked out, the heating system had a pipe that came up through the 3 floors right up to the top floor. And there was a great big round that looked like 2 great big drums put together with small pipes, which was a heat exchanger. So as the heat from the furnace came up, it would distribute the heat into the room. You'd save that. And then that box went into what I call a soot box that came down through the ceiling from the chimney, and that soot box was burning a little bit. And the flames were kind of scorching the ceiling, and my dad had been smart enough to put a 2-inch pipe all the way up through the corner of the hallways from the basement right straight up through, and I had a fire hose. It was only 1.5-inch pipe, but 1.5-inch fire hose would put out a lot of water. So the bishop, instead of yelling for help, he grabs the water and turns that on, and Constableville has a very fine water system, which my dad helped and instigated, actually, and it carries an actual operating pressure on 150, 60 pounds, which has to be regulated. Most homes put regulators on because it's too much for the modern equipment. So he grabs that and starts spraying this water all over this soot box that was on fire.